We're here in the corner of Glenwood and Lund. It is gray but pretty warm. We're here at the Heartland Cafe, where every Saturday morning we bring you another edition of the Live from the Heartland Show. I'm Michael James. I'm usually here with my longtime partner and co-host, Katie Hogan. And Katie is still writing a eulogy for our good friend Helen Doria, who passed away. So I'm up here with our pal Thom Clark. And we're going to talk a little bit about the year in review. A little bit later, we're going to bring Jacoby Williams up. He's a historian out of the University of Kentucky, originally out of Chicago. He has a new book coming out in February called From the Bullet to the Ballot. It's a story of the Black Panther Party and coalition politics, racial coalition politics in the era of the Rainbow Coalition here in Chicago. We're getting near the end of the year. We're still in a kind of a warm phase. Hasn't been too cold, but we're getting a little bit of snow. We're all looking forward to the next few days, and then it's back to work. But we got to look at what came down over the last 365 days almost, and kind of get a picture of where we're at and where we're going. I've always said that we need to know where we're coming from, where we're at, so we have a little bit of a hint about where we're going to go. So good morning to you, Thom Clark. It's great to have you here.
Happy end of the new year for you.
I am happy.
Or the old year, I guess.
Yeah. And just before I forget, for all you athletes, and we are all born athletes, sometimes the system takes it out of us, there will be the last run of the year on Monday night. Meet here by 8 o'clock. It's Athletes United for Peace annual event. We go down to the lake. We do a short course, 2.5 miles. Have a great time. Then you can come back here and really frolic to the reggae band, Roots 101. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start at the local level. Let's talk about our ward. A little bit what's going on. Hit the heavy stuff, Tom.
Well, we did participatory budgeting again. We have all sorts of new infrastructure going in, which is why our streets are all torn up. Those of us who've managed to get new gas lines and water lines have new streets this winter. Others are still dealing with huge potholes and holes in the ground as sewers and stuff get done. And, of course, we've had all of our local CTA stations in various stages of renovation and white paint and whatnot.
It's looking better.
It's pretty phenomenal stations, and bike racks up the gazoo I'm now seeing at our new plaza here at Lunt in Glenwood. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it is nice, and people do lock your bikes because people still take them, so use those. But there is where the little grocery store used to be across the street. There have been a lot of things. There was a flower store. There was a art gallery. I mean, there was a lot of things happening there. Ceramic gallery. It's now it's cleared out at the north end of the Morsell stop. That would be the Lunt end at Lunt and Glenwood, and there's plenty of room to park your bikes. I like it, and I do like that our streets are getting paved now and then, and that. Hopefully the gas company will finish up putting in the lawns that they promised after they put these meters on the outside of the building so they could turn them off real easy.
We've actually had sod done twice in our front parkway.
You're lucky over there.
The drought took care of the first stuff.
That's the more well-heeled end of the ward.
Exactly. But, our chickens loved it because we had a little extra grass and stuff for them to play around with once we got going. In fact, I should do the chicken report before we get much further on.
Well,
we got 3 hens a-laying, and they've continued to lay during the winter. This is 2 years now in our West Rogers Park household that we've had hens in the backyard, and they're still producing and doing great. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like a truly range-free, uncaged, from your backyard fresh egg.
And what do you do when they get old? You're going to make a stew?
Well, 2 of them were close to chicken
bury
stew.
Them.
But they started producing again. Ironically, as it got colder, our 2.5-year-old hens who had kind of gone on strike over the fall, we're not sure why, came back into production. So we have enough to give away occasionally to relatives and neighbors.
For you people who live outside of our listening area who may be listening on WLUW.org or perhaps seeing it in the future, there is a phenomenon in our community of people beginning to have chickens. And being an old 4-H club guy, my wife showed me the article a few years ago and made me promise that if I read it, I wouldn't want to get chickens right away. So it's been a few years, and I'm due, and I might.
Well,
Get
I'll tell you, I think it's
some
part
Rhode
of
Island Reds.
It's part of something that's not just limited to this year, but some of us have been at for 30, 35 years. The restaurant's been here trying to do a different kind of food. We are, I think, beginning to see a new food movement. I think it got generated by the attention to food deserts in other parts of the city and what are we going to do about it. But a general feeling that we can do better by buying more seasonally and buying more local, even in a Midwest winter environment like we have despite global warming. There's a good 6-7 months of growing season that people don't realize. It's not just summertime, and we can get a lot off of our earth right within 25, 50 miles of where we are now sitting, and that's generally healthier, better food, and also is better for our economy.
This was the second or third year of the Glenwood Avenue Market.
This was the third year.
It went really well. They actually are carrying on just down the street. Once a month they have a winter market, and people can get some really good stuff then too, in addition to cabbage.
And beets and all those good root vegetables we ought to be having more of.
Yeah, I think it's been really good, and there is a undertaking underway to have a food buying co-op in the ward. I can't give you any more details, but I know that Tom Rosenfeld of Earth First Farms, and he's involved here at the Heartland in a big way. He's been at some meetings with those folks, so that's progress.
And possibly an urban farm on Howard is still kicking
we're talking
around.
about that. Now, our alderman, who I think has deservedly gotten a lot of credit over the years for being pretty progressive and out front, but also deservedly has taken a few hits about not being as progressive as he has been in the past. And I bring it up only because I'm concerned, and a lot of people bring it up to me. And he did get an award from IVI-IPO along with another alderman for their support and the work they've done around community budgeting process. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and maybe some criticism?
I think the participatory budgeting movement is a fascinating new development.
He was right at the forehead.
And we've done it 3 years now in Rogers Park. It is a phenomenal public education campaign as much as it is anything affecting really how much tax dollars are spent. To my mind, one of the frustrations with this, although I think it's a great model and it's now going to probably start happening in about 5 or 6 other wards this coming year, and probably double that in another 2 or 3 years. So we're looking at potentially upwards of a third to a half of city wards beginning to have a true grassroots determination of certain infrastructure improvements. The downside, we're talking about, in terms of the ward wish list, impacting maybe $1.5 million worth of street resurfacing or public murals or other informational kiosks, bicycle racks in a city budget of $6 billion. The difference between what we can control ward by ward locally and what the mayor controls downtown is pretty vast. So I think it is, at this point, an interesting symbolic effort that has some great buildup of social and civic capital that we need more of in this town, where we've had too much machine politics making decisions for all of us. So it's a great start, and Joe deserves a lot of credit for taking the lead up here in the 49th Ward to make that happen. On the other hand...
Yeah, you did have a criticism of him, then we should air it.
I think that in the grand tradition of the Fighting 49th, it was very surprising to have our elected alderman scotch an effort to at least put on the ballot a referendum on whether or not we should have an elected school board. Joe has a very long explanation for why that paperwork was late and he couldn't move on it, but I know a lot of previous aldermen and mayors who would not have let a 10-minute gap in the filing of paperwork change whether or not we could put a referendum on the ballot, particularly one that speaks to more community self-determination and local control over the way school budgeting and school closings and all sorts of other things going on right now are finally determined. So I was frustrated that Joe took that position. He considers it a principled position because the paperwork just wasn't in time. I don't buy it, and we've continued to agree to disagree on that issue.
Well, both of you are good at having ongoing discussions, and I think that I would predict that in 2013 or whenever we get ready for the next election, there'll be people who get enough signatures so that issue will be on the ballot in the ward.
I agree.
I think that's a common thing, and we'll certainly be watching all of our politicians, including our beloved Joe Moore, closely over the next year. Let's move to the mayor a little bit. There was a cover on the Sun-Times yesterday of Mayor Rahm as a statue, kind of knocked off his pedestal, and it talked about him taking a number of hits this year, but also talked about him coming back on had a rebound. So, what's your take on the mayor in the year 2012?
Well, we have a very different leader than we've had the last 30 or 40 years, and I'm including both dailies and Herald in the midst of that. And I will tell you, when he got elected, I was hoping for the best, but in fact, he's confirmed a lot of why I worked for someone else, which is a very clear "daddy knows best, except what I have to say" point of view about the world. And Rahm is a very smart guy, but he's a technocrat. He is not from here. He has grown some Chicago roots, but I'm still...
You mean being a suburban guy?
Yes, he's a suburban guy who thinks he knows best, and sometimes he does, but a lot of times he doesn't.
Talk about Chicagoland.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
But I don't know that he's made that many entrees into suburban mayors or leadership, or we'd see a far more effective regional approach to solving some of our challenges that we face as a region. If I would like to see more of that, in fact, because perhaps as someone who came from the suburbs, he might have a better ability to engage Chicagoland in some of the pressing regional issues we have. But I think there are two issues in particular where Rahm's own mouth got him in trouble. And the first was his raising early on hyper-security concerns around the G8 NATO conference, which just set up this whole dynamic where the out-of-town media that came here, which we know something about because we tried to feed them stories as part of my work at the Community Media Workshop, largely came to cover the kind of preordained NATO photo op diplomatic meeting type of thing. And local media covered largely protesters in the street. A lot of the potential economic boost, the tourism boost, other things that could have been part of that story got lost in this security frame that the mayor put up early, which many of us felt really infringed on our First Amendment rights. And it just set up an early dynamic that kind of hurt the mayor and the city's opportunity to maybe show a little different face than it has in the past to the rest of the world. In fact, part of the problem is that the G8 got taken away. I still think that had more to do with local security concerns than than Putin from Russia deciding not to participate. And Barack just kind of took this one Christmas ornament away from the mayor, and he was left with just NATO. And without getting much deeper into that, the NATO weekend was hyped up a lot and ended up not being as brilliantly exciting or breaking new ground as some of us felt, whether you were on the protest side or the showing off the city's best face side.
Do we not have some kids from those demonstrations still in jail?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, because we had Michael Deutsch on the show this year, and from the People's Law Office, and he really laid it down how Anita Alvarez, who I think will be up for a lot of criticism over, continually on a number of her cases, really has been pushing this case of the kids from the NATO demonstrations, and there just really is a lot of injustice and entrapment involved in that.
Very much so, and it's a pretty consistent pattern on her part, and I'm really surprised how little this came up until after she was reelected. Probably the biggest vote getter on the ballot, which to my mind she deserved the least, but what's done is done. I want to mention the other thing that I think the mayor stumbled on, which was what's going on with the schools.
Yeah, this is big time. I mean, for all his...
This has continuing reverberations, including his own alleged desire to run for higher office nationally. Now, it may be that you can still be a Democrat today and not have labor behind you, given what's going on with low organized labor generally. But he really stumbled here in the way he took on what he thought was vulnerable leadership, which proved to be far more powerful and is more powerful now because of the way he took on the union. And I wish Karen Lewis and the Chicago Teachers Union the best in what's going to continue to be a very challenging fiscal time as the school board and the union and parents and principals continue to adjust with the onslaught of charters and the alleged overcapacity we now have. When I look back on this year, Michael, I think we're going to possibly want to reframe it in a year or two as the year of infrastructure, because on several different fronts, whether it's a CTA or gas and water lines or what's happening with underutilized school buildings, at a time of fiscal distress with public budgets, there's a lot being done with our infrastructure. It's probably one of the more critical things the public sector does for all of us.
No, it's
is
great.
Keeping our streets paved and all that, and yet we don't yet have a practice in this city, in this region, for really full disclosure and discussion about what's the next best step. What kind of plan should we have in place for some of these infrastructure improvements?
Well, one of the things that's going to come up sooner or later, I mean, in China the other day, they just started up a new high-speed rail, and that seems to be happening in a lot of places. We've had nothing but resistance. This is not a local-only issue. This is like a national issue in this country, is building high-speed rail, and it's had a lot of opposition, although some lines are planned. I think that part of when you talk about infrastructure improvement, the year of infrastructure, part of that it goes to the economic crisis that the country's been in, and whatever the federal government has been able to feed into this situation. Everywhere I went across the country this year, I was out on the Great Plains, I was out on the prairie, I drove across to Olympia, Washington. Everywhere we went, you saw crews working on roads, building things. I mean, there was a lot of it happening, and certainly we've seen it